r/AskReddit. What's the most horrifying how do you not know how to do this moment you've experienced with another person whilst adulting? I remember when I first started dating my now husband, I was hanging out at his apartment waiting for him to get out of work. His place was a bit messy, so I decided I'd tidy up for him a bit. Fast forward to the next morning, and he comes in a little shocked. Why would you load the dishwasher like that? I had never had a dishwasher before in my life or mayo. We are talking cups facing up, the gas pans shoved in, the whole 9 yards. Thank God he stuck with me, lol. That's actually hilarious and kind of wholesome. If you never had one you would never know. I had a college roommate who would just throw stuff in, but she did have one growing up. She was just lazy. Had a guy constantly asking what time is it. By the 6th time I said, bro, there is a clock right there. He said, I don't know how to read it. Grown ass man. Couple weeks later on Facebook someone shared a picture of cursive writing. He made fun of the people who couldn't read it. I posted a picture of a clock and said what time does this say? He blocked me. When I taught students how to tell time in French, I found out many didn't know how to tell time at all. My German teacher found she had to teach us English grammar so she could teach how German was different. I have many great stories about my former college roommate. 2 of my favorites are: she wanted to make pasta. She put a pot on the stove and poured the noodles in, no water in the pot, turned on the stove. After a while she asked me, how come these aren't getting soft like when my mom makes them? She also made brownies from a box. The box instructions say, grease the bottom of an 8x8 pan before pouring in the brownie batter. You bet your ass this bitch picked up the 8x8 pan, flipped it over, greased the bottom of it, and then flipped it back over and poured in the brownie batter. Every few weeks I catch my roommate trying to put his metal tea strainer in the microwave. This is in spite of the fact that our first week living in this apartment, he destroyed the microwave and had to pay for a new one because he put a metal tea strainer in the microwave. You could have left it at him making tea in the microwave. A friend who was pushing 40 had never paid a bill before. She had gone from living with her parents to living in a dorm to living with her parents again until she got married. Then she got divorced and was living on her own for the first time. Got a text from her asking if my power was out too. Then she realized it was just her. Her excuse was she never paid attention to the bills because she thought they were receipts and that the cost was included in her rent. Her water was cut off a couple weeks later and we had to talk about that too. I'm afraid this is about to happen to my brother-in-law's soon-to-be wife. Not that they'll get divorced, but she's 33 and has never lived on her own. She's just lived with her parents her entire life, including the short time she was in college. She and my brother-in-law are planning to marry and move her into his place next year. They got engaged earlier this year. For their engagement, she picked out a $15,000 ring and couldn't wrap her head around why brother-in-law freaked out about it. She genuinely had no concept of how much money that is, nor any concept of what an insurance policy for jewelry looks like, or why it would be necessary for such a purchase. Her current plans for the wedding include around 450 guests, and she can't understand why that's not affordable. I had a roommate at university whose cooking method was put baked beans in a Tupperware, seal the lid, turn on microwave, when lid pops, and explodes beans everywhere they are cooked. And you can guarantee he'd refuse to clean the microwave too. You kidding? How else would he eat them? The trick is to put it in a larger Tupperware so that when it explodes it goes into the bigger one. 19-year-old dude, how do you cook a fried egg? Gave him instructions and left him to it. Came back a while later to ask how it went. Fine in the end, but it took a few attempts because the yolk kept breaking. What do you mean kept breaking? Well, I kept throwing them away because I thought breaking the yolk made it poisonous. Once again, he was 19 years old. Reminds me of when I was dating a 19-year-old dude. I explained that eating raw nuts is healthy, so he bought a bag of peanuts. He complained 2 days later that he was going to stop eating them because they upset his stomach, so I got a free bag of peanuts, yay. He was stunned when he saw me shelling them and eating the nut. Because he was eating them shell and all. For 2 days. Surprisingly did not end well, but I got a lot of terrible dumb stories out of it. Roommate in college was 22, had lived in an apartment for 3 years prior to moving in together. Legitimately did not know how to remove a trash bag from a trash can. We had the simplest trash can possible, had never turned on an oven before, and, my favorite, complained one day that their bathroom was always sopping wet every time they showered. Finally realized that they never put up a shower curtain. They learned quickly and became a pretty good cook by the time I moved out, but man, their parents really never prepared them for living alone. Like, I know it's technically the parents' fault in these instances, but at a certain age surely the ability to Google literally anything places the blame squarely on the individual's shoulders. For sure. Age 22 is a little too old not to have Googled it themselves, but since they never did anything themselves, and having anxiety, they lacked so much confidence in their competence that it was crippling them. They Googled some things while I lived with them, did everything correctly, but would ask me 2-4 times if I thought they did it right, even with the evidence right in front of their face. Anxiety and complete inexperience really hurt them, even with all the resources they needed at their disposal. Worked at an on-campus store that sold a lot of essentials for students living at dorms. I had one girl ask me what laundry detergent was because she never did laundry. She asked if I could help her do her laundry, but I declined as I couldn't leave the register, which of course she was mad about. Sorry, I have to actually do my job, lady. In a weird way I'm jealous of those people. I've done crap like that since I was physically able to, and I can honestly say they haven't missed much. I appreciate how, hopefully, it's shaped me into a better person, but come on, it's boring. I can understand. I was definitely envious of them, because it was obvious they came from money, whereas I was working 2 part-time jobs while going to college. But sadly they were also the type of girls who only went to college because everyone else did, and more than likely would just try and find someone who'd marry them only to be further pampered. I recall having a lab partner who was in a sorority who didn't know how to do laundry or cook. They paid people to do that for them. I asked her if she was interested in at least learning how to do it for the future. She replied back saying, "That's silly, I'm going to marry someone with money, where I'd just hire someone to do it for me." I had no response to that, since I clearly could not relate. More of a how do you not know to not do this. First year at uni, a girl in my halls is microwaving some food and left it in the metal foil container. It took 3 fire engines to put out the fire, and we had to have a new kitchen installed. Not to mention, this was at like 3 AM, and I had an exam the next day. I was not impressed. Oh, I got one. I work as an EMT for a private company, so we mostly deal with nursing homes and the elderly. One day when I was about 6 to 8 months in, I got assigned a partner who was in my orientation class. He was a little older than me at the time, like mid-20s, but he seemed a little childish. Maybe he's just sheltered, I think to myself. Anyways, we got a patient I've had a few times before. She was a sweet, little old lady with COPD and CHF living at an assisted living. Call was for pneumonia. She's prone to this stuff, so it wasn't a huge deal. Slap her on oxygen and keep her sitting up till we get to the hospital. The first red flag though was this kid didn't know anything. He didn't know how to take a blood pressure. He couldn't find the medical history or medication on the paperwork, which is clearly labeled. He didn't even push the stretcher, just walked next to it with a hand on it. When I asked him about all that, he said, "My partners usually do that for me." So, I put her on an oxygen mask and sit her all the way up, mildly agitated. I tell myself it's just one shift with this kid. He's in the back with her, and I tell him to just switch the oxygen from the bag, which is a small tank, to the main tank, which is huge, because with the amount of oxygen we are giving her, the bag will run out not even halfway before the hospital. It's about 25 minutes, which normally wouldn't be a huge deal. But when we pull up to the hospital, and I open the back doors, I'm ducking shook. The oxygen mask isn't inflated, meaning she isn't getting oxygen. She's pale as shit. I can literally see her accessory muscles moving, struggling to breathe. And this kid was sitting behind her, with a clueless half smile on his face, looks at me and says, "The main tank is broken, so I left her on the bag." This woman, who needs oxygen without pneumonia, was barely breathing for at least 15 minutes. And this ducking idiot didn't even check. We take her into the hospital. I ask him to find an oxygen tank, while explain to this woman's daughter what happened. He says he doesn't know where to look. I ducking find it, and told him to talk to the daughter. When it's all said and done, I check to see what's broken. He didn't turn on the tank. Please tell me he's not an EMT anymore. This is terrifying. I never saw him again after that shift, which is rare, because we have a small base. I'm hoping he got one too many reports. He's the only partner I've ever had that I lost my patience with. My ex and I were cooking together, and one of the pans got too hot, and we had a minor grease fire. She grabbed a bag of flour. As tempted as I was to slap it out of her hands, I didn't want to aerate a bunch of flour next to a grease fire, so I grabbed it with both hands and forced it, and her, because she wouldn't let go, over to the countertop, and then dropped the lid on the pan. I asked her what her logic was, and she said, "Well, you're supposed to put baking soda on a grease fire and not water, right?" "Yes." "Why did you try to use flour? What's the difference? They're both white powder." Jesus, that's even worse than water. She almost made a bomb. Yup, those are the two most flammable things you'll find in a typical kitchen. Damn, that would basically have turned into a sort of homemade fuel air bomb. Our kitchen sink has one tap, two things, don't know what they're actually called, for hot and cold. I walked into the kitchen and my partner kept switching between hot and cold. I asked him why. "Well, the hot gets too hot, so I run the cold instead for a bit." He didn't know you could run the hot and cold water at the same time. My girlfriend, now wife, put a pan of oil on too high of heat and it hit the flash point and caught fire. She freaked out and went to get a large thing of water, and I stopped her and tossed the pan lid on top until the flames went out. Then she asked me why I stopped her. I was very thankful that I was there the first time she had a grease fire. Not only could she have hurt herself, but it was in a college dorm and the whole friggin' place could have gone up. I had a grease fire not long ago. I was cooking away, and the pan went alight. I was holding the pan handle. I didn't know where the lid was. I casually called in my wife. No response. Called again. She replied she was just finishing something. I was still holding a pan of fire before casually walking past her, through the front door, and placed it on the drive. In my head it felt like minutes had passed, but it was probably only a few seconds, and my wife mocks me for how calm I was carrying a pan of fire casually through the house. In the late 90s. Had a co-worker who complained about her PC being slow. Took a look and the hard drive was full. Largest folder was her recycle bin. She had never ever emptied it in years of use. I emptied recycle, cleared temp folder, and PC started working fine. She was happy until her big Excel tracking sheet was gone. Oh no. She did not know where it was on File Explorer, so I asked her to show me how she opened it. She goes to the little storage container on her desktop, named recycle bin, and it was normally at the top, but now it's gone. No backup. She cried to management that I destroyed her computer. Manager laughed when I told her the truth. That's wow. How was she using Excel, but didn't know what the recycle bin was? Excel isn't exactly basic knowledge. You'd be amazed. A lot of older people, at least where I live, took dedicated spreadsheet/word processing courses when the programs first started to hit the scene in schools, etc. Great for doing their books, but they are still absolutely clueless on anything outside of the program. Not sure if this counts, but when I took a food safe course, someone asked if they could wash a turkey with dish soap. He failed the course. I guess we were still in high school, but we were 18. Me and my buddy Ferris were just getting into going to the gym. We went with Ferris's friend Tom. After working out, in the changing room during some small talk, I saw Tom putting on a shirt. Tom put the shirt over his head, but didn't put his arms through the sleeves. He managed to pull the shirt over his torso so that it was adequately on before wiggling all about and bending his arms in odd ways to get them into the sleeves. I didn't take much notice to it the first few times, but after a few months it was apparent he did this every single time. Tom didn't know how to put on a shirt, at least efficiently. Eventually we asked Tom why he put his shirt on like that, and he said something along the lines of, "Wait, what? Don't I do it the same way you guys do?" I guess he had never really thought about it before then.